Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Ontology Talk. I'm Adam Pease. Today I'd want to follow up on the video that I made about formalizing the notion of a climbing carabiner in SUMO. And so here's just a quick review to start with. So we defined that a carabiner is a device, and what I added here is that it's a safety device. This is a fairly new term that we have in SUMO that specifies that it's a device designed to prevent injury or death for humans. And that's certainly the case for a carabiner. Also added some additional detail just to talk about things that could be formalized in the future. So the notion that there are carabiners can be further broken down into ones that are, and forgive this is a little technical in climbing if you're not a climber, carabiners that can have locking gates or wired gates or bent gates, lots of different types that could be formalized in the future. But here we're still just giving an introduction. It really depends upon the requirements of your domain or your project, how deep on this you want to go. The goal is, if you use a concept, define it well, but you may not use all of the possible subsidiary concepts that one could define. For example, if you weren't running a rock climbing store, then you wouldn't need these at all. You would just have devices or maybe safety devices and other things that you manufacture. So it's really all driven by the requirements of the domain. This is not done just for entertainment, obviously. It's done for a business purpose. So we earlier defined that carabiners are metal, and one thing that I just added was that earlier on we had the notion that carabiners had springs in them. So if I have a carabiner, so this is the implication sign, so you can read it as if this first argument, if C is an instance of carabiner, then there exists some variables H and S, where H is a hinge, and it's part of the carabiner, and S is a spring, and it's part of the carabiner. So we've just added this notion that in addition to having a hinge, it also has a spring. So this little gate on the carabiner will snap back into place when it's not under load, when you're not slipping a rope into the ring shape that is the carabiner. Earlier on, in the last video, we defined that a carabiner that is closed has the shape of a ring, or a ring torus, more specifically. Again, another term that's already in SUMO. And I added in here that if we have a carabiner that's closed, it's also possible for that carabiner to contain a climbing rope. That's really the purpose here of the carabiner. It's supposed to hold on to that climbing rope, be part of your system of protection, that if you fall while you're climbing, that rope and the carabiner and your other gear will catch you and prevent you from falling to the ground and getting hurt, or worse. So if the device is open, now I've added, right, so if there's a carabiner and during some particular time period the carabiner is in the open position, so the gate is no longer closed, then it's no longer a ring torus, but it's no longer a ring torus just for that period. So this is a crucial thing to be able to say, is to provide a temporal qualification for what you're saying. And to do this in a way that's valid for the logic that you're using, so you don't get false conclusions. Right? If the device is open, it's not open for all time, and it's therefore not also a ring shape for all time. Sometimes it's the device is closed and it's a ring shape. It's a loop. It's going to hold in your rope. But if you open that gate and try to slip some rope in there, well, it's a device that is open and it's no longer a ring shape. In addition here, I added, just recently, the notion of a climbing carabiner. So there are carabiners that you'd use to, say, clip your keys to your belt loop. Those don't have a climbing rating, a strength rating, and so we want to clearly distinguish the notion of a climbing carabiner from other carabiners. So a climbing carabiner is particularly has the purpose of being used in an event where the event is a rock climbing event. So it has the purpose here, you can see, of being used as the instrument in an instance of the class rock climbing. And then I've added this notion of an uncertified carabiner. which is different than a climbing carabiner. So we use the disjointness relationship. So there's never going to be an instance of a carabiner that's both uncertified and a climbing carabiner. It's one or the other. I also wanted to add in the notion of rope. So we already have string in SUMO, which is any sort of flexible, long, thin thing designed to tie stuff together in some fashion. A rope is a bit more particular in that it's really a collection of one or more strings woven together so that the sum is stronger than the individual strands. And we can get larger and larger ropes that are made from more and more layers or instances or windings of string taken together. So here let's see, yes, we got rope. I gave it a term format, so the pretty printable English string for rope, which here is just lowercase ROPE, and an axiom. Here we can read this as saying if we have an instance of rope, then there are two instances of string. They're not equal. This is important in logic. You have to specifically say that two instances are not equal. If you don't say that explicitly, then it could be there's an instance of string and then another instance of string that's actually the same string. So you have to be very specific here and say that they're different. So we said that there are two instances of string. They're not equal to each other, and they're both part of the rope. Right, that's the requirement for rope. A rope is at least two pieces of string taken together that are part of this whole. They're not just random pieces of string unconnected with each other. They're both part of the same thing that's called the rope. And then we can go a little further. We can say that there's climbing rope. Climbing ropes has a certification. We could go even deeper, saying that climbing rope could include dynamic and static rope. So dynamic rope is rope that stretches a bit. So if you fall, when you hit the end of that rope and it comes tight, you don't injure yourself by the harness tugging suddenly on your body. You've got a little bounce in it so that you can survive that fall without injury. And static rope is the opposite. It doesn't stretch very much, and it's designed for a different purpose. And you can have static rope that's climbing rope and it's rated for a certain purpose and so on. So we could go a lot deeper here, but I'm not going to do that right now. I just wanted to sort of flesh out really the minimum that we needed to talk intelligently about Carabiner and have the computational system, the ontology, have a lot of the essential knowledge about Carabiner encoded formally so that the machine could effectively differentiate it from other things, and so that people, developers, whether they're database developers, taxonomy developers, or other roles, could speak effectively to one another with regard to a very objective standard. That's what this provides. It makes sure that somebody else couldn't come along and say, for example, that a keyring carabiner is a climbing carabiner. Right? That would be in conflict with what we've already said formally and objectively. So we don't have to argue about what the English text may mean. We've got a useful comment so people can quickly gather the idea. But if there's any dispute or confusion about what this symbol means, we've got a precise logical specification for it. All right, so hopefully that fleshes out this definition and is a good follow-up to the first video. And I'm also going to provide a link to another video where I'm going to go into more detail following up the previous video that I made about this notion of shortage. We'll do that next. So I hope you enjoyed this, found it informative, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and especially eager to hear your comments. If you have ideas about what are the things that you believe are essential about Carabiner, maybe that I didn't formalize or that you would have formalized differently, be very eager to hear that and have some discussion. All right, thanks very much.